Borada. Hello everyone, my name's Debbie Hicks and I'm Creative Director at the Reading Agency. We're a national charity working across the UK to use the proven power of reading to tackle life's big challenges. I'd like to start by welcoming you all and to thank you from the Reading Agency and our partners for joining us for this exciting webinar of bibliotherapy, a term which means the therapeutic use of books and reading to support mental health and well-being. We're going to be focusing our bibliotherapy discussion today on Reading Well Books on Prescription, which is an important reading and health intervention available across Wales, delivered by the Reading Agency, working in partnership with public libraries, SCL Cymru and Welsh Government. We've got an amazing panel of speakers joining us here today to share their thoughts. So we've got Professor Neil Frude, consultant psychologist and Books on Prescription Wales pioneer, who will be speaking alongside senior librarians Cheryl, Hesketh and Bethan Hughes. And we're also going to hear from Community Navigators Rebecca Sheckley, Haf Williams and Sue Mitchell about how they use Reading Well as part of the social prescribing toolkit. But I've got to start with some housekeeping first. Some of our speakers are going to be delivering their presentations today in Welsh. Simultaneous translation into English is available by clicking on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen and selecting English. If you want to mute the original language, you can do this by pressing the button beneath the language you choose. But do remember to unmute when you want to go back to the main screen. So the main seminar will take place on the Welsh channel. And when you finish listening to the interpreter, remember to select Welsh again so that you can hear the rest of the speeches. If you've got any problems hearing the interpreter, contact us for a transcription. You'll find our email address at the top of the chat function. I also just wanted to let you know that we're going to be opening the floor to questions at the end of the panel session. So do post anything you want to ask in the Q&A accessible at the bottom of the screens, but also use the chat to record your thoughts or any observations. Before I hand you over to our experts, I just wanted to start with a few observations from the Reading Agency on the Reading Well programme, because we're incredibly proud to lead and partner on this work, which is driven by our passionate belief in the proven power of reading to tackle health inequalities and deliver better health outcomes. There are 3 Reading Well schemes available in Welsh public libraries, funded by Welsh Government, providing support for dementia, adult mental health and children. And together we've achieved something amazing, a new public library health service which is driven by the power of reading, which is quality assured by health professionals and experts with lived experience, and delivered through a curated list of brilliant books by brilliant authors, able to inspire and inform, spark story sharing, and start conversations that help us to manage our well-being. And there can be no doubt about the need for such support. These are really anxious times. With public spaces closed and long-term social distancing in place, the experience of the pandemic has been disruptive and disorientating for all. And not surprisingly, the consequence has been a huge increase in the need for mental health support as prevalence rates soar. More than 1 million parents recently surveyed by Barnardo's said that as a result of lockdown, their child now needed psychological help. And whereas 1 in 8 children had a diagnosable mental health condition prior to COVID-19, Save the Children report that 1 in 4 are now experiencing anxiety and are at risk of lasting psychological distress and depression. Between April and December 2020, mental health counselling sessions delivered to young people in Wales have increased by 13% on average. And a recent Mind Cymru survey published in November showed that of a sample of 13,000 people, half were showing clinically significant distress linked to the pandemic, with 20% reporting severe effects. So the psychological impact of the past year has been huge and wide-ranging, but I think it's also thrown into sharp relief existing health inequalities with younger people, women, those living in poverty and BAME communities disproportionately affected. We know that library-delivered bibliotherapy schemes such as Reading Well aren't the answer to the COVID mental health challenge, but they can be part of the solution. Welsh Government have funded Reading Well book collections to help adults, children and families to understand and manage their mental health and well-being, as well as to support people living with dementia. The collections available in every library authority in Wales provide quality assured reading, curated and endorsed by health professionals and people with lived experience. Reading Well absolutely delivers the gold standard in bibliotherapy practice. It's evidence-based, it works within clinical guidelines, it draws on expert advice, consultation, review, and best practice. It actually takes over a year to put together each book list with an expert panel who work really hard to ensure that each book selected has been rigorously evaluated and is accessible and relevant to need. Each collection also provides a really wide range of content, from book-based CBT therapy to fiction and real-life personal stories, and in a range of different formats, including ebooks, audio, graphic, picture books and workbooks. And we work hard to ensure that there is something for everyone, including less confident readers. So how does the scheme work? Books can be recommended by appropriate professionals, but they're also available for anyone to borrow from public libraries in their preferred language. The books are available in both Welsh and English, thanks to our brilliant partners, Book Council of Wales, who've worked tirelessly to ensure the highest quality translations, including the development of new Welsh mental health terminology where none has previously existed. Reading Well is a powerful public library reading and health offer that really does work. So far, 1.2 million people have borrowed 2.3 million books, with 90% of users saying their Reading Well book was helpful in helping them to understand and manage their mental health. It also delivers those associated benefits to reading, with regular readers reporting reduced stress and depression and stronger feelings of relaxation than people that don't read. Reading Well works because it delivers the quality assurance of health partner endorsement with the guaranteed authenticity of genuine co-production with experts by experience. And it works because it's driven by real partnership working with public libraries who deliver Reading Well right into the heart of local communities, and with health partners such as the Royal College of GPs, Mind Cymru and local health boards supporting people across the country. And although library spaces may not be open at the moment, libraries are working really hard to get books to those that need them most through click and collect and digital lending services, alongside local partnerships with schools, in the community and with the health sector. Reading Well sits really at the heart of the Reading Agency's mission to tackle big life challenges such as poor mental health through the proven power of reading. Our Reading Well partnership with public libraries drives a public library bibliotherapy offer that really is delivering better health outcomes for local communities. We really believe that Reading Well is more than just a book list. It represents the real power of reading and libraries to change lives. But I'm now going to hand over to our experts to tell you more, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce first Professor Neil Frude, consultant clinical psychologist and founder of the original Books on Prescription Wales, from which Reading Well has drawn both its inspiration and approach. Without Neil, Reading Well would not have happened, and the Reading Agency is incredibly grateful to him for his long-standing support. So over to you, Neil.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you very much. I'm Neil Frude, as Debbie said, and I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm going to start with two quotes. The first is from the 16th century. "Come, take choice of all my library, and so beguile thy sorrow." That was written by William Shakespeare, and it's from Titus Andronicus. And the other quote is very recent. It's from a scientific paper that reports a systematic review of randomized clinical trials conducted over the past 20 years on the impact of self-help books on people with clinical depression. Here's the quote. "Bibliotherapy appears to be effective in the reduction of adults' depressive symptoms, providing an affordable and prompt means of delivering help. The results of the present review suggest that bibliotherapy could play an important role in the treatment of mental health issues." What these two quotes have in common, of course, is the powerful message that books can have therapeutic power. And this is true of many kinds of books, from do-it-yourself cognitive behavior therapy manuals to novels and poetry. Appreciating the fact that books can greatly benefit people who are experiencing emotional distress then leads us to think about how we can take full advantage of the potential. We know that at any one time, around 1 in 6 of the adult population across the UK has a clinical psychological problem, and the comparable figure for school-aged children is around 1 in 7 rather. And those figures are from early 2020, before any effects of the pandemic. So very many people are distressed, and in the majority of cases, their suffering could be significantly reduced if they had access to psychological therapy. But sadly, only a small minority, between 10 and 20%, ever receive such help. There simply aren't the mental health professionals available to provide individual face-to-face treatment. But there are other ways of providing psychological support. And one very effective and highly cost-effective way of doing this is by means of high-quality, carefully selected books whose authors have set out to provide the necessary support and guidance through their writing. So although psychological therapy can be highly effective, the delivery of such therapy has been greatly limited by a logistical issue: limited availability. By analogy, it's as if we had developed a highly effective vaccine but had limited capacity to distribute it. Thus, the overall impact of psychological therapy has been relatively slight, because there are limits to how many people can be reached by the traditional methods of delivering such treatments. I have a simple formula: impact equals effectiveness times reach. So the impact of therapy reflects effectiveness. How effective is the therapy? And it also reflects reach. How many people can be provided with the therapy? So in principle, we could double the impact by doubling the effectiveness. Actually, this is impossible because psychological treatment is already over 50% effective. Or we could double the reach, and with affordable and plentiful resources, we can easily double or triple the reach, or even multiply it by 100-fold. Bibliotherapy is certainly highly effective. There's a huge evidence base showing that many people with emotional problems can benefit significantly from this type of psychological help. And bibliotherapy can have very wide reach if we can find ways of getting the most effective books into the hands and homes of a large number of people. So the strategy of bibliotherapy makes so much sense, in principle. But if it's to make a real impact, we need to translate this strategy into a working scheme. And as a scheme that has been devised to maximize impact is that of books on prescription. Now, I think everybody watching this will be familiar with the basic books on prescription idea, so I won't need to describe that. But it is worth emphasizing that, in essence, it's a public library-based service that operates as a joined-up system, incorporating elements of the existing infrastructure. It makes use of readily available resources, health professionals, public libraries, and books, carefully selected, high quality, truly excellent books. The approach employs the familiar clinical device, the prescription, and a GP's prescription or recommendation for a particular book can give added credibility and increase a person's motivation. But these days, the majority of books on the list are not in fact prescribed, but are borrowed by people who have learned about them through the reading agency leaflets and websites, or have come across them as they browsed library bookshelves. Such a variety of access routes is greatly to be welcomed, because every borrowing of each one of the books increases the reach and therefore the impact of the scheme. The first library-based books on prescription scheme was launched in Cardiff in 2003, and this was soon followed by the nationwide scheme Book Prescription Wales, which was fully funded by the Welsh Government. When this scheme was launched in 2005, it attracted considerable international attention. It received press coverage around the world, and as a consequence, it was then emulated in a number of countries. A survey in 2011 indicated that there were over 100 books on prescription schemes operating in various parts of England alone, all with different book lists, operating strategies, and so on. There were clear benefits, of course, in having a single integrated national scheme, and the reading agency took on the task of devising and coordinating such a scheme. and they did so magnificently, resulting in a quantum leap in the quality of all aspects of the operation, including the book selection, professional and reader involvement, coordination with libraries, promotion, evaluation, and the development of a number of related schemes. I was truly delighted then when in 2018 the Welsh Government commissioned the Reading Agency to collaborate on extending their operation into Wales. As part of the major initiative Together for Mental Health and Wellbeing in Wales, Welsh Government funded the rollout of the first Reading Well scheme, including paying for the book collection and the supporting materials. And they also paid for the translation into Welsh of the majority of the books in the 3 schemes that now operate in Wales. This has led to over 60 books on mental health themes for adults and children becoming available in Welsh for the first time. This mammoth translation task, and I've been told that it may be the largest translation project ever commissioned by Welsh Government, has been expertly managed by the Books Council of Wales. Following the initial launch of the dementia scheme in Wales in 2018, the adult mental health scheme followed in July 2019, and the child scheme in 2020. The launch of the child scheme, of course, was online. And while we can celebrate the fact that the launch did take place despite the pandemic, it's also very frustrating that temporary restrictions on library opening times are limiting the accessibility of the books that are needed so much in this time. You'll be aware of the fact that this webinar is happening during Child Mental Health Week, and that children's mental health has been increasingly recognised as a major cause for concern. A highly significant report by the Welsh Assembly in 2018 pointed to the urgent need to address the rising number of children with mild, moderate and severe emotional problems, and it called for increased resources to be made available. The excellent Reading Well for Children scheme can play a significant part in providing some of the help that is needed, especially in these disrupted and troubled times. So much care went into the selection of these books and into the design and production of the supportive materials, not to mention the translation of the books into Welsh. And now the issue is, as always, that of reach. We need these books to reach the many children who could benefit from them. We have such enthusiastic librarians who champion the scheme, and I'm hoping that schools will fully appreciate the value of these schemes and introduce the books into the classroom. Some experts are now warning of possible severe longer-term adverse mental health consequences of the pandemic for both adults and children. Such widespread distress, if it does occur, will call for every available means to reach those of us who are experiencing post-pandemic distress. Bibliotherapy can be a powerful resource that can help us, as Shakespeare put it, to beguile our sorrow. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, Neil, for that excellent overview of both the efficacy and the evidence base of the programme. So now over to the library perspective on bibliotherapy and its role as a key community asset, particularly in the social prescribing toolkit. So I'd like to introduce you to our 2 superstar librarians who are doing really important work in this area. Bethan Hughes, Principal Librarian from Denbighshire Library, and Cheryl Hesketh, who you'll see on the screen at the moment, Library Development Manager for Conway Libraries. So, Cheryl, can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Debbie. Hope everyone can hear me. Bore da, good morning. Well, as you can see, I hope, I am speaking to you from a library. It's actually Abergele Library. And I want to consider what it is about libraries that gives them such a unique position and the ability to successfully deliver the schemes that Debbie and Neil have discussed this morning. Why libraries? Public libraries sit within the heart of their local communities, both physically and figuratively. The value that communities place on public libraries has been seen during this pandemic we now find ourselves living through. Public libraries were one of the first services which were allowed to operate during this crisis, largely because it was recognised that books really are a lifeline to so many people, particularly during isolating, stressful and anxious times. During normal times, when we can be open, then libraries provide a neutral, non-judgmental space just to be. The author Matt Haig said that public libraries are more interested in us as an individual than the size of our bank balance or how much money is in our wallet or purse. There aren't many community spaces which are totally free at the point of access in the way libraries are, and which exist for everyone, regardless of who they may be. It's a very levelling environment in that sense. In public libraries, everyone receives the same invitation and welcome to use our spaces and our books, whether you are newborn or 90. So they are places of safety, neutrality, and reassurance, and our partners from other sectors recognise this strength we have within our communities, and this is why they want to work with us to deliver their services and engage with their users within our space. We have a trusted record of working closely and effectively with a whole host of partners from social care, health, employment, education, the third sector, and the list goes on. Libraries are non-threatening and they are impartial. If you walk through the door into a library, no one has any idea what you're going in there for, so your privacy is protected and you don't feel you're being judged. Library staff are committed to and eager to help their readers, and that help and support is rewarded by the affection that communities demonstrate towards library staff. Library users will share the most personal and poignant stories with the staff, and for some people, the library may be their only source of human chat on a daily basis, and library staff recognise and value the significance of their role in this way, and they are respectful and discreet. And it's important to remember as well that we offer a fully bilingual service and that these conversations can take place in Welsh and English, and that we provide books in both languages to reflect and meet the needs of our communities. It's incredibly important to be able to explore and understand issues surrounding your well-being or that of a family member, friend, or colleague in your first language, which could very likely be Welsh here in North Wales. So I think when you combine all these factors, it really does make sense that libraries are the perfect partner to provide bilingual, medically endorsed books and information on such a common, yet potentially sensitive subject as our emotional and mental health. Libraries also provide the flexibility of ensuring we do all we can to reach readers with the books that can support their mental well-being, even during these challenging times when libraries can't be open as we would normally be. As Debbie mentioned, we've expanded our digital offer during the pandemic so that people can download ebooks and audiobooks, and we've established a call and collect service so that we can arrange for people to pick up their books at an agreed time from the library. All of this within the safety of approved risk assessments. And we're also enabled to carry on providing our home library service at this time, because we know that people, especially when they are at their most vulnerable, really do rely on getting their books. Libraries are places of discovery and hope and insight, which provide limitless opportunities for expanding and enhancing our lives through this unrestricted access to information and reading. Libraries help us reach our full potential by providing gateways to support and opportunity for everyone, which is hugely empowering. I'm very proud to have worked in public libraries for over 25 years, and I'm passionate about the role of reading to support our mental health. I've delivered various bibliotherapeutic projects, and I have to say that Reading Well is one of the most powerful projects to support mental health that is freely available to everyone through their public libraries, and I believe it really does have the potential to save lives. Thank you for listening. Diolch am wrando. I'm pleased to hand you over now to Bethan, who will explain in more detail how Conwy and Denbighshire have worked in partnership to deliver Reading Well across the region. Mae Bethan yn mynd I siarad yn Gymraeg, and Bethan will be speaking in Welsh. Diolch, Bethan.
Diolch yn fawr, Cheryl. I'll just give everyone a moment to switch over to the interpretation if they need it. A diolch yn fawr iawn am y gwahoddiad ac am y cyfle I siarad hefo chi gyd y bore yma. Wel, ers pan lansiwyd y cynlluniau darllen yn well yng Nghymru, ro'n i'n benderfynol o ddod o hyd I ffordd i'w ymsefydlu o fewn y sector iechyd a gofal cymdeithasol yn lleol yma yn Sir Ddinbych ac ar draws y gogledd, a'i cymryd nhw y tu allan i'r llyfrgell ac I mewn I ddwylo y bobl fyddai'n elwa ohonynt a'r bobl fyddai'n gallu eu hawgrymu a'u cymeradwyo. Roedd strategaeth law yn llaw at iechyd meddwl Llywodraeth Cymru yn edrych am ffyrdd newydd o gefnogi iechyd a lles meddyliol. Roedd Llyfrgelloedd Conwy eisoes yn cydweithio gyda meddwl a lles ymynol dan deiryddiaeth Byd Oeg Evans, I ddod â buddion darllen I ddor iechyd a cymdeithasol. Ac mi roedden ni yma'n Sir Ddinbych yn rhan o sawl fforwm aml asiantaeth, lle roedd cyfleoedd I hyrwyddo darllen yn well. Daeth yn amlwg bod yna gyfle da yma I gydweithio ar draws y ddwy sir. Felly, gyda chymorth Siwan Jones o Iechyd Cyhoeddus Cymru, I agor drysau I ni o fewn y sector iechyd, a thrwy ein aelodaeth o'r tîm gweithredu lleol ar gyfer Conwy a Sir Ddinbych, cawsom wahoddiad I wneud cais am arian, I godi proffail darllen yn well a'i effaith posib ymysg ymarferwyr iechyd. Ond mae unrhyw un sy'n gweithio mewn llyfrgelloedd yn gwybod bod I wastad yn her I ddod o hyd i'r capacity I wneud y math yma o waith ymestynol. Felly roedden ni'n sylweddoli fod hwn yn gyfle euraidd I greu y capacity hwnnw, ond hefyd I gymryd trywydd ychydig yn wahanol ac I weithio o fewn cyd-destun rhagnodi cymdeithasol, maes sydd yn ehangu'n gyflym. Ers sawl blwyddyn mae ein llyfrgelloedd wedi gweithio yn agos gyda'r rhwydwaith o gyfeirwyr cymunedol, sy'n cynnig gwasanaethau rhagnodi cymdeithasol i'n cymunedau lleol. Rydyn ni'n cynnal pwyntiau siarad ac ystod eang o wasanaethau cymorth a chefnogaeth cymunedol, sy'n manteisio ar nodweddion a sefyllfa unigryw llyfrgelloedd fel mae Cheryl wedi amlinellu. Fe wnes I sylweddoli fod sgiliau'r cyfeirwyr cymunedol a'i rhwydweithiau eang o gysylltiadau yn ddelfrydol I godi ymwybyddiaeth o darllen yn well. Cais am yn hwyr wnaethon ni gychwyn 3 cyfeiriwr cymunedol I weithio hefo ni yn ychwanegol i'w swyddi arferol, fel bod modd I osod darllen yn well I mewn yn ei hymarfer rheolaidd fel man cychwyn. Yn ogystal â hyfforddi staff llyfrgell mewn ymwybyddiaeth o iechyd meddwl ar ymchwil y tu ôl I ragnodi llyfrau, y bwriad oedd I weithio'n agos gyda meddygfeydd lleol, meddygon teulu a gweithwyr iechyd rhengflaen eraill I sicrhau I bod I gyd yn ymwybodol o darllen yn well a'i botensial. Cychwynodd y cyfeirwyr ar ei gwaith yn rhoi sgyrsiau a chyflwyniadau, arddangos y llyfrau a chefnogi pobl I gael mynediad i'w llyfrgell leol i'w benthyg nhw. Ac wedyn, wrth gwrs, daeth Covid, a bu'n rhaid rhoi'r math yma o weithgaredd o'r neilltu, a gan fod rhaid i lyfrgelloedd gau, roeddwn ni ddim yn gallu hyd yn oed cynnig mynediad i'r llyfrau chwaith am gyfnod. Fe ddaeth un cyfle unigryw i ymateb i'r pandemig, gyda chais i leoli rhai sy'n gweithio aruthrol. Yn hapus ni wneud hynny. Ystod yr haf, wrth i lyfrgelloedd gael caniatâd i gynnig gwasanaethau archebu a chasglu, fe wnaethon ni ailymgynnull fel tîm prosiect, a rydym ni nawr wedi addasu'r cynllun i weithio'n wahanol, ac i ganolbwyntio fwy ar godi ymwybyddiaeth y cyhoedd yn gyffredinol o darllen yn well, yn ogystal ag ymarferwyr y maes iechyd a gofal. Fel y clywch chi toc, mae'r cyfeirwyr wedi ymgorffori'r cynllun o fewn eu gwaith, gydag unigolion a gyda ymarferwyr eraill. Ac mae gennym ni gynlluniau i wneud rhagor o ddefnydd o'r cyfryngau cymdeithas. Gyda hydref, ni nawr yn cyrraedd teuluoedd, ysgolion a'r sector gwasanaethau plant. Cyn cloi, hoffwn i ddweud fod darllen yn well wedi bod yn fodd i ni fel llyfrgellwyr i greu perthnasau gweithio newydd a chyffrous gyda phartneriaid yn y maes iechyd. Mae'n rhywbeth real a hawdd i'w egluro a deall, ac mae'r buddion posib yn glir i bobl. Trwy ddefnyddio darllen yn well fel man cychwyn, rydyn ni'n gallu mynd ymlaen i amlinellu cynegion eraill ein llyfrgelloedd a'r buddiannau maent yn eu cynnig. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi am eich gwrandawiad, a mae'n bleser gen i rŵan i gyflwyno'r cyfeirwyr cymunedol sydd wedi bod yn gwneud y gwaith ar y rhengflaen i ni, sef Rebecca Sheckley, Haf Williams a Sue Mitchell. A'r cyntaf i siarad fydd Rebecca, sy'n gweithio fel cyfeiriwr yma yn Sir Ddinbych. Mi fydd Rebecca yn siarad yn Saesneg. I'm delighted now to ask Rebecca to speak, and she will be speaking in English if you'd like to switch back to the session.
Thank you, Bethan. My name is Rebecca and I'm a community navigator. I work for Age Connects North Wales Central, but I sit within Denbighshire County Council. Myself, along with a team of others, deliver the social prescribing service for the local authority. Social prescribing can be delivered in a number of ways, and even with Age Connects, the models of delivery differ. But essentially the outcomes are the same: to promote health and well-being, support people remain independent, and signpost and refer people to a variety of organisations. We have been told we are the tourist information of services and a minefield of information. As a community navigator, this Reading Well project has fitted into 3 streams. Firstly, we have used the books to support our citizens, the people who have been referred to us. During COVID, our toolkit went from plentiful to virtually nothing. So we've been able to use Reading Well when it was needed the most, and it has been extremely valuable. Secondly, as a community navigator, I used to spend as much time as possible within the community. I take great pleasure in attending social groups and informing people of my role and how I'm able to support. But during COVID-19, this has changed. However, I was able to use networks to speak to citizens virtually. I have attended many a meeting to discuss the project and talk about the books. As I've been fortunate to have a set of books at home, I have been able to read out segments of a particular book, which has been extremely powerful. Age Connects North Wales Central have also promoted the scheme via their newsletter to reach people without access to the internet. Finally, I've used my networks to virtually speak to other professionals about the books, both within the local authority and the third sector. By sharing the scheme, these professionals can use it as part of their toolkit. I would be honest and say that meetings virtually has meant I have spoken to a wider range of professionals than perhaps if I was attending meetings face to face. Feedback from professionals have been very positive, And I think that their willingness for me to be a guest speaker demonstrates not only the need for the scheme, but also its value, especially during these difficult times. I will now hand over to Harv, who will be speaking in Welsh. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Bore da. A fel y clywsoch chi gan Rebecca, yn enw I di Haf Williams, a dwi'n gweithio fel cyfeiriwr cymunedol, yn cydweithio gyda grŵp clwstwr meddygon teulu Gorllewin Conwy. Ein prif nod ni fel cyfeirwyr cymunedol ydy ymestyn allan unigolion I ddelio â materion seicogymdeithasol. Rydan ni'n delio â materion o ganlyniad I unigedd, arwahanrwydd, diffyg cymhelliant, hwyliau isal a diffyg hyder. Ein gwaith ni fel cyfeirwyr cymunedol ydy cyfeirio unigolion i'r gwasanaethau cywir, cynnig wybodaeth a rhoi cyngor a chefnogaeth. Yn ogystal â materion seicogymdeithasol, rydyn ni hefyd yn dod ar draws materion anhwylder iechyd. Felly, mae o'n hanfodol gallu cynnig gwasanaeth ac agwedd gyfannol, sydd yn manylu ar beth sy'n bwysig i'r unigolyn. Dyma lle mae llyfrau darllen y well wedi galluogi ni I gynnig rhywbeth ychwanegol, ac ar yr un pryd cefnogi I wella iechyd a lles, mwyn magu hyder a dennill pwrpas, bod yn fwy annibynnol a hefyd I annog at sefydlu iechyd. Hoffwn I rannu un stori hefo chi fel esiampl o sut mae llyfrau wedi helpu un gŵr. Mi gafodd Mr Smith ei gyfeirio atai oherwydd I fod o yn byw ei hun. Roedd o'n dioddau o iselder ysbryd a hefyd yn ei chael yn anodd iawn I ddelio gyda unigrwydd. Yn ddiweddar, mi gafodd Mr Smith broblemau iechyd a mi newidiodd ei fywyd dros nos. Ac o'r herwydd, roedd hyn wedi cyfyngu ei symudiad corfforol a'i adael yn hollol ddibynnol ar ei gadarolwyn I symud o gwmpas. Roedd derbyn ei gyflwr yn anodd iawn iddo fo. Cyn ei broblemau iechyd, roedd o'n berson bywiog iawn ac yn mwynhau cymdeithasu. Un o'i brif hobïau fo oedd pysgota, ond ar ôl i'w iechyd dorri lawr, bu raid iddo fo roi gorau I yrru car. Felly roedd mynd allan o'r tŷ yn rwystredig iawn iddo fo, a bu raid iddo fo roi gorau i'w bysgota. Mi ychwanegodd hyn at ei unigrwydd, yr unig blesar oedd ganddo bellach oedd gwylio teledu yn ddyddiol. Roedd o'n gweld y diwrnod yn hir ofnadwy, ac roedd llawer ei deulu fo yn gweithio yn ystod y dydd. Mi ddudodd wrthai'n ddiweddar I fod o'n colli bysgota'n fawr iawn. Ond, pan dorodd Covid-19 allan, cafodd hyn effaith pellach ar iechyd meddwl Mr Smith. Cododd ei lefel gorbryder oherwydd cyfyngiadau ynysu. Mi nes I gyflwyno Mr Smith I lyfrau darllen y well, ac mewn dim o amser, mi roedd staff y llyfrgell wedi trefnu cerdyn aelodaeth iddo fo, a hefyd diwrnod cyfleus i'r gofalwyr ddod â'r llyfrau i'r tŷ. Heddiw, mae Mr Smith yn derbyn detholiad o lyfrau ar gorbryder, iselder ac am bysgota. Mae hyn yn enghraifft perffaith o sut mae llyfrau darllen y well yn fan cochwyn da ac yn agor drysa a mynediad at ddewis eang o lyfrau llyfrgell ar gyfer diddordebau unigolion. Byddai'n dal I gael sgwrs a Mr Smith yn aml. Mi ddudodd yn ddiweddar, mae llyfrau'n ddiddorol, dwi'n mwynhau edrych ar y lluniau. Mae o'n gwneud gwahaniaeth rhag gwylio teledu o hyd, a dwi wrth y modd yn derbyn y llyfrau yn gyson. Fel y gwelwch chi, mae llyfrau darllen y well wedi cael effaith bositif ar fywyd Mr Smith, ac ar yr un pryd yn rhoi cyfle iddo fo gael sgwrs ar bob galwad, sydd yn sicr o leihau unigrwydd a gwella y iechyd a lles. I'm now going to hand you over to Sue Mitchell, who is also a community navigator and covers the coastal area.
Thank you, Hav. Good morning. I'm Sue Mitchell. I also work as a community navigator for Age Connects, and I work with referrals for patients within the Conway West GP Cluster Network locality. I have always been passionate about supporting others with their mental well-being. And prior to the navigator role, I was a volunteer counsellor for several years, supporting women affected by domestic abuse with Aberconway Domestic Abuse Support Service. Even then, the waiting times for access to counselling and psychological therapies were quite lengthy. And in March 2020, COVID-19 brought about increased pressure on already overloaded services as the nation struggled to adapt to lockdown restrictions. People that would normally cope well found themselves suffering with anxiety as they struggled to adapt to working from home, being furloughed from work, homeschooling, and the whole anxiety and uncertainty that COVID brought with it. As a counsellor and in my role as a community navigator, the use of books on prescription has proved to be invaluable and has allowed me to continue to support patients as well as local groups working with mental health issues through the Reading Well scheme. As well as working one-to-one remotely with patients referred to the Navigator scheme, I have been busy raising awareness locally and linking in with hard-to-reach groups, such as those supported by Aberconway Domestic Abuse Service. Working in this way has allowed for a far wider reach and has proved very effective in terms of benefit to individuals that have been referred to the service. Feedback in terms of benefits gained to date has been extremely positive, and individuals supported have quoted the following. I have found the use of books on prescription has helped me to gain a sense of control back in my life. Another said, I now feel as though I am not the only one going through this anymore. And another, I feel I now have the tools to manage my anxiety as and when it should arise. Personally, I feel that using books on prescription has fitted seamlessly into the work myself and my colleagues do in our role as community navigators and in helping support others with their mental well-being. I am currently having conversations with Aberconway Domestic Abuse Service to see if books on prescription can be introduced into the educational programs they run, such as the Freedom Programme for Women, as well as the STAR programme that they run in schools, supporting young people with their mental well-being. I hope overall today we have given you a flavour of the work we have been involved in and how working in partnership with the libraries and using books on prescription in our toolkit has been invaluable in supporting others with their mental well-being. Thank you for listening, and I will now hand you over to the chair.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that was an amazing insight, both from the library's perspective and also from the work of our community navigators, of the role that Reading Well is playing, and those personal stories that Sue shared with us, I think are a really important part of the evidence base of the value of this scheme. So we're now going to move on to the Q&A part of the session. So I'm going to ask our panelists to join us. We may end up turning some cameras off if we have few internet issues, but we'll try and see how we go. We've had some questions come in, so I wanted to start with the question around accessing the books, and obviously, our librarian partners have talked a bit about ways in which we can access books in lockdown. The question we've been asked is, are the books still being borrowed? Is the need out there? Are people finding these books even though libraries are closed? So over to Bethan and Cheryl, just for your observations on that.
Yes, they are being borrowed, obviously not passing the volume that we might do if people were able to browse and pick up themselves, but certainly the access to the books is certainly there, and it's a really important message that we're conveying to all our partners and in all our publicity. So yes, the books are being borrowed.
Okay. And what another question is around which books, which are the most popular ones, just from the library perspective? Which books do you feel are being picked up the most? I can give you a perspective nationally, but be interested to know what you're seeing.
On the whole, it tends to be the shorter introductory books, which is understandable if it's the first time somebody has decided to use a book to help with their therapy. Also, we find that the personal memoir, the narrative, the Ruby Wax, the Matt Haig, then those books are also popular. They're also, well known. Certainly our experience. I don't know, Cheryl, if it's any difference in Conwy.
No, it's absolutely the very short series on overcoming anxiety. They're accessible. They're very easy to get into, because when you're not feeling well, it's quite difficult to focus and to concentrate. So you want something really that will hit the spot quite easily. And I think absolutely the lived experience, as Bethan was saying, the Matt Haig especially, but reading about somebody else going through what you're going through can actually provide you with so much reassurance that there is a way through, that these feelings aren't going to last forever, and that, if you can just stick with it, you can navigate this with support. So I think they've been a wonderful addition to the scheme, the lived experience titles.
Thank you. And Neil, I just wondered, from the health partners perspective, which books you find health partners prescribe the most?
Well, I think they probably go for the more sort of technical, do-it-yourself CBT type books. But I want to say something about, the personal memoirs and so on are so important. And what they do, and also what the CBT books do, is they have a common thread, and it's hope. It's that there are ways of getting through this. So Matt Haig's book, which I read a couple of years ago, it's about how he survived, how he came very close to not surviving, but he survived. And holding on. When people are terribly depressed, especially, they feel there's no way out. They feel that they're in a deep, deep pit, and there's no way that they will ever be able to get out, and they get very desperate, and it's all overwhelming. And then you've either got a book that says, hey, there are things that you can do, strategies you can use, which will help to change your experience and change your thinking. And you've got that, and that's the sort of more technical book, the do-it-yourself sort of CBT book. And then you've got, the testimony of Ruby Wax and Matt Haig and so on, who are saying, here, I was really down, but I got through it. And so both of those have in common hope. And that's it's such a therapeutic ingredient. It's so powerful that we need, to give people hope when often they feel hopeless. And that hopelessness is very, very heavily correlated with, desperate measures. It really is. So the rescuing, they both have this rescue function,
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. And that absolutely fits with our picture of national loans. We've got, on the one hand, books that teach CBT techniques for common conditions like anxiety and depression are very popular, but also, those personal memoirs. So the Matt Haig book comes out very highly. And also in children's mental health, Ruby's Worry picture book is very heavily borrowed. So that absolutely reflects the picture that you've painted. I just wonder, from our Community Navigators' point of view, do you get any feedback on the books and which books people like? Just any anecdotal evidence around that would be really helpful.
Usually the ones that people like, from my experience, are the short versions that Cheryl was talking about, the introduction books, because people can be overwhelmed with something that's more in depth. And they seem to like the shorter ones. They can, it's an easier read for them, if you like.
Yes,
okay.
I think, yes, if I just add to that, I remember in the original Cardiff scheme, when we went back, we had a book on that was about 150 pages. And then when it came to revise the list, it had been revised, this book, into a second edition. and it was now 400 pages. And, you know, it was just too much. I mean, it was on depression as well. And it was just overwhelming. I mean, you know, you can't expect anybody with depression to be able to wade through, you know, 400 pages. It was just incredible. So that we didn't recommend it at that stage.
No. And it's somebody's just asked a question in the chat about, you know, practical health books and biographies. Would you recommend fiction books or novels? And, you know, I'd have to say that there are some really good fiction books on those lists, and that they do have their place as well, you know, because of the value of, you know, somebody telling a story about an experience. But we're very careful about those fiction books to make sure that they do have an evidence base, and that, you know, there are, you know, that they're describing an authentic story. But I think that's been a really interesting development of Reading Well, hasn't it, Neil, that fiction and biography and has found its place on the list, whereas when it started out, it was very much about CBT.
It was. I mean, I think there is another difference which it's worth noting, which is that if you've got something which is a sort of do-it-yourself manual, I mean, if it was a gardening manual or a fishing manual, well, it doesn't really matter who you are. That's the steps that you follow in order to get the result that you want. Whereas, as we know, you know, novels are very much matters of taste. And one person is very, you know, really very impressed with a particular style, and other people not. And that sort of individual difference, it's really difficult to, I mean, I think this is where, if you've got navigators who can actually interact with people and get to know them and then direct them towards, here's a novel you might like. But I know from, you know, my wife, for example, is in a reading group, as many people are, you know, and it's quite amazing how, you know, everybody reads the book and then they come in, and some people loved it and some people hated it. And that could spoil things, because if you're prescribed a book which you hate, then you know this prescription thing is not very good. Whereas if it's a manual, if it's like a cooking book, a recipe book, well, you might not like it supposedly, but you follow through and you get the same result. I mean, that's it. You know, it's an odd thing to say. It's not a matter of taste when we're talking about cookery books, but actually it's not. Whereas novels are.
Yeah.
A matter. You know.
And we've been asked a question if it's in other places other than libraries, and I know libraries have developed lots of networks and partnerships around these books, and that they are in prisons and they are in schools. I mean, just from Bethan and Cheryl, you know, where have you got any good local partnerships which have put the books out in community spaces as well as in libraries?
That's not something we've developed yet.
Oh, Bethan, you've frozen, I'm afraid. Oh, Cheryl, shall we go over to you?
Local library.
Oh, you've come back.
Am I back?
You're back.
Apart from where we place the books, as I mentioned in my talk about where we were asked to put them into the staff welfare units in the large hospitals during the COVID response, we haven't done that. We've debated it many times, but we felt it was really important that the books were at the library and available from the library, because possibly this could be some people's first introduction to using a local library, because they've been prescribed a book by GP or a navigator, and that by coming in for this first book, this could be the opening of the whole world of the availability of services, books, resources, IT, and all the vast range of services that libraries have to offer. So we haven't yet placed them to be seen by a library offer, not to be exclusive, but actually inclusive, so that we can introduce people to that wider range through coming to the library to get the book.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd echo what Bethan said, and I think that was demonstrated in Harv's example that she gave, where, you know, that gentleman was given a books on prescription, but actually what it then did was open up. He registered for the home library service, and it's actually opened up this whole new world for him, because he's now, you know, seeing a member of the library staff regularly, looks forward to getting his books delivered, and so he's got that other avenue has been opened up as a result of the scheme, really.
Okay.
But that connection with libraries has been needed.
And we've had a really interesting question from a an Irish librarian from Kildare Library about, if we were going to do this again, what would we do differently? And I just think, I think there's been, from our perspective, some really important learning around reading well. I think when we started out, we didn't think libraries and fiction would be acceptable on a health list. And I think that, that widening of the footprint of the scheme has been really important. I think dropping that formal prescription element has been really important, so that people can get the books anonymously. You don't have to go via a sort of health route. And that co-production, the lived experience has really helped to shape selection. So I think they would be my three big bits of learning. I just wondered if anybody else had any learning that they'd like to share. Neil, I mean, you've been involved since the beginning. Do you have any perspectives on this?
Well, I agree with the three things that you've said. I absolutely agree with that. I think maybe at the beginning, to actually have it as, this is an outpost of medicine, almost, it gave a sort of credibility and so on. I mean, the scheme got very good coverage in the British Medical Journal and so on, and they had and so on. And I think, there were things we got right, like, for example, how many books should be on a list. And right from the beginning, we had it between 30 and 35. And I think that, all around the place, that's what's happened. And most of the schemes that are running now, have that sort of almost that magic number. You don't want too many, but you don't want too few, and so on. I think yes, basically that. I don't know if there's anything else.
Okay. And we've also been asked about other lists and where we might be going next. And somebody's raised the question of the LGBTQ support and the huge need for more information in that area. We create the lists by looking at need and mapping against prevalence and health priorities. But I just wondered, from our Community Navigators' point of view, if you thought there were any really big areas that we should be applying Reading Well to in the future. What are your common health concerns that you see out there in communities? Rebecca, have you got any views on that?
Sorry, I thought Hav had unmuted.
Oh, Hav's unmuted. Sorry. Hav, over to you.
You go ahead if you want.
Go ahead, Hav.
Well, at the moment there's a big variety of books available for people, and I think we're tapping into as many different issues as we can at the moment. So there's always an opening there for other maybe health issues. It covers depression, if you have sleeping disorders. So if we come across an individual and, we can have that discussion with them, they might, be very lonely, but also we can have that discussion with them to see, what other things we can do for them, and look on the social side of their lives. And if there's any health issues they've got, we can tap into that and provide them with the right book. So at the moment it's working well for us, but there's always other options of looking into other kind of books that we can provide people with.
Okay, Rebecca, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just a second. I think specific healthcare needs could be an avenue to pursue, and then lived experience about particularly healthcare needs. So we've got the dementia, but other healthcare needs. But I think we're in such difficult times at the moment that people's main prevalence is loneliness and isolation and confidence for when things eventually do open up. I think we are going to be, people are going to be worried about going out. So any confidence building schemes, I think would also be beneficial. That the scheme has been extremely valuable and it's been fantastic. So any expansion on that is going to be valuable for all people.
And I know the books on the list around self-esteem and confidence are really well used as well. So I think that really sort of reinforces what you're saying, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think that we're probably going to run out of time for questions. I know we've got lots more, so I think we'll collect those up and do an FAQs probably that we can then make available after this session, because there's lots of really interesting questions coming through around the work that we're doing. But I think we've now run out of time. But I just wanted to end then by absolutely saying massive thank you to our panelists for their really great contribution. It's been a very enlightening and interesting session, and fantastic work going on in Wales with support of libraries and Welsh Government. And also just to tell you that BBC Radio Wales, the idea will be taking the webinar and an interview with Professor Neil Frude, and it will feature in their series, which runs between the 9th and the 30th of March. We're not absolutely sure which programme it will feature in at the moment, but this webinar will be featured as part of that programme. And once that programme has gone out, people will then be able to find it on BBC Sounds, and we're also making a recording of this webinar, which will be available via the Reading Agency website as well in a short time. So many thank you to our panelists, many thanks to our audience, and a big thank you to Welsh Government for believing and investing in Reading Well. And with that, I will leave you all and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.